Hey guys, welcome to WoodWork.LIFE. So today I'm going to show you how to make this simple sign out of pallet wood, plywood, a jigsaw, and a pin nailer. Pretty straightforward. I'm building this one for my daughter's first birthday. So let's jump right into it. First of all, you're going to need a pallet. Probably one will do you. Then you'll need just a scrap sheet of plywood, something that you can nail the pallet wood to. Really simple. As far as tools, all you'll really need is a jigsaw and a pin nailer. Or I guess you could use finished nails and a hammer if you wanted to. A table saw or a track saw, or at least a circular saw would help a little bit, but you could do this whole project with just a jigsaw. The first step was going to be to decide what kind of text I'm going to use for this design. In this case, I wanted sort of a classy, cursive look. Well, I didn't want it, but that's what Angela wanted anyway. So I drew that out. I know I have great penmanship, blah, 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 whatever. Anyways, I drew that out and sort of planned out how I wanted to design this sign. Once I settled out the scale, it was time to pick the lumber I was going to use. In this case, I actually used the pallet that my table saw came from. It was all made out of oak, it was pretty rough, but had a lot of character. I couldn't really think of anything else I was going to use it for, so I trimmed it up and used it for this sign. Next, I affixed the pallet wood to a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. This would be to reinforce the letters so I could cut out, the narrow curves and lines that would make up the cursive letters I wanted to design. To start out, I just used 18 gauge pin nails to attach them at the edges. Later I would go in after I'd drawn in the letters and put them in the field to actually attach the letters to the backer board. Next, I went over the whole thing with a little bit of 40 grit sandpaper. This isn't a necessary step, but it knocks down some of the splinters and rough spots. It makes working with pallet wood just a little bit more palatable. After I smoothed out the surface, I laid out my entire design in pencil first. This allowed me to really sketch out the letters and get the dimensions just the way I wanted. If you're not as confident with your artistic talent with a pencil, you may want to print this out at a Kinko's, just get a big print and glue it on, but I'm pretty confident with my ability to lay out some text, so I sketched it out and just kind of stepped back to get an idea of the scale and make sure it all just looked right. Once I was happy with the final design, I went over the final outline with chalk. This would just be a little bit easier to see on the wood backing while I went over it with a jigsaw. I marked out the baseline of all my letters just to make sure that they were relatively straight. I also wanted to go in with a track saw to remove the bulk of the material, so I don't have to remove quite as much with the jigsaw. I could have easily done this with just a circular saw or the jigsaw itself. Finally, I went through the whole field and added 18 gauge pin nails just as often as I wanted. They would just add to the rustic look, so I wasn't too worried about them in the finished product. Finally, I went with a jigsaw to remove all the waste from around the letters. A couple of tips with a jigsaw: don't skimp on blades. In this case, I go with Bosch blades. They're cheap and they work well. Also, don't push the saw through the wood. Just let the blade cut through the wood and just follow along with it smoothly. Make sure to stay close to your line and don't try to cut any corners too close. This will just bend the blade or break a tooth and really just ruin your day. Next, when you're cutting curves that aren't too tight, try to be long and sweeping with your motions. Even if your cuts aren't perfect, at least they'll look perfect because they'll be smooth and continuous. If you're choppy and you have to jump into it multiple times, it'll be clearly evident in the finished product. Finally, remove the waste as you go. That way the blade doesn't have to fight against the extra tension of being stuck between two boards. So if you cut a piece, just cut out your waste and attack it from another angle. That way you'll be able to get those smooth curves that are in tight inside spaces without having to fight against the extra waste. After I cleaned up as much as I could, I stepped back and took a look at what was left over. From there I took my chalk and marked up whatever else needed to be cut out. After that, it was time to remove the inside of the letters. For that, I used a downcut bit from carbideprocessors.com. I'll leave a link in the description. These are really nice bits. It's carbide all the way through, so they'll last you a long time. But I just used those to remove that little bit of depth without giving up the strength of the plywood by going all the way through. From there, it was just time to hit it up with a little bit of paint. I didn't want to char them, but I wanted to give it a little bit of a layered finish. So I painted the inside of each of the letters I just cut out with a router with some black spray paint. Then I went over that with a little bit of gold. And finally, I hit the whole thing with just a little bit more white spray paint. This would be the kind of detail that fell into the crevices within the wood. Then I sanded off most of the white and just left it on some of the low spots, and hand sanded it inside of the circles just to reveal the black. I'm really happy with how the final product turned out. It was a real hit at the party. It made for a great smash cake throne for my now 1-year-old daughter.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Yay, Marigold.
Thanks for watching. This is, I guess, normally where I'd ask you to like, subscribe, share, whatever. But this party actually happened the day before the big floods hit Houston. So I want to take this opportunity to raise a little bit of money if I can for the American Red Cross. I'll throw a link up here. Or if there's another charity that you think fits you better, go ahead and reach out and just help those people in Houston in need. There's thousands of people that lost everything. There's hundreds of thousands of people affected, and they're estimating about $100 billion in damages. So if you have a chance, if you have a little extra change you can spare, try to help somebody out in Houston in need. Thanks for watching today. Remember, just keep your tools sharp. Keep your mind even sharper.